audio proceeding by Faith, Sarah Lin Lu's Unconventional Public Library exhibition. In the formal American art world, this might not be considered a standard exhibition. There were no gallery lights, no professional exhibition walls, no curatorial team, not even display panels strong enough to hold framed oil paintings. There were only a few movable fabric-covered panels, some pushpins, and a Chinese-American artist standing in a public library lobby, quietly removing frames from her artwork and turning what had been planned as an oil painting exhibition into a modest poster-style public display. For Sarah Lin Lu, however, the moment carried a quiet and unexpected meaning. Earlier in the year, she had planned to present an online virtual exhibition. But the project gradually faded. The gallery let it go, and she did not push. The plan quietly fell away. Months later, those same works found their way into a public library in Pennsylvania. What surprised her was not the location, but the reality of the space. Before arriving to install the exhibition, Sarah had never used this kind of community display panel. She had not inspected the space in advance and did not know what kind of exhibition boards the library would provide. Wanting to avoid anything too heavy, she had already chosen lightweight acrylic frames instead of heavier materials. But when she arrived, she discovered that the panels had no hanging hooks and could not support framed work. In that moment, she did not stop. She removed all the frames on site. Then, one by one, she printed reproductions of her paintings directly onto the panels. The large original oil paintings she had planned to show did not appear. Instead, the exhibition became something far more temporary, modest, and community-centered. What surprised even Sarah was her own lack of emotional turmoil. To go from an oil painting exhibition to a poster exhibition is a big difference, she later reflected. But I did not have a strong emotional reaction. I simply adjusted and continued. That response may reveal something important about the artist's current inner life. From a Jungian psychological perspective, this was more than a practical adjustment. It suggested a deeper shift in the structure of identity. For many artists, the form of an exhibition can become closely tied to the artistic persona. Proper lighting, professional walls, original works, institutional recognition, and public validation. These outward forms can easily become connected to the artist's sense of worth. But in this moment, Sarah seemed less attached to proving herself through a perfect form. She was no longer asking only, what should a real exhibition look like? She was asking something simpler and deeper. Can these stories enter a public space? For years, Sarah's paintings have developed as a kind of visual diary. Her work often grows intuitively, element by element, as memory, prayer, story, and image meet on the canvas. She does not always begin with a fixed final composition. The painting grows as she responds to it. She has described her creative process as living water. Now that same creative way of being seems to have entered her public life. If the original paintings cannot be hung, reproductions can be shown. If a formal gallery is not available, a public library can become the place. If ideal conditions do not appear, she can still begin from what is given. She did not cancel the exhibition. She did not complain. She did not interpret the limitation as humiliation. I did my best, she said. The conditions here in America are not always easy, but I did not feel wronged. My gift is from God. I want to see how God will use it. I am willing to begin humbly and leave the result to the Lord. In this sense, the library exhibition represents more than an art event. It marks a movement from artistic self-protection toward artistic service. From a Jungian lens, it also reflects a passage often associated with the second half of life. The ego begins to loosen its grip on image, achievement, and control, and a person becomes more willing to respond to a deeper calling. Sarah was no longer focused on whether the exhibition looked successful by external standards. She seemed more concerned with whether she had faithfully responded to the invitation before her. For that reason, the temporary display, with its fabric panels, paper reproductions, and pushpins, held a strange sense of completeness. It did not feel like a finished destination. It felt like a beginning. Sarah herself called it a small opening statement. There was no defeat in that phrase, no grand ambition either. Instead, there was the realism of someone who has lived through displacement, rebuilding, hidden years, and repeated beginnings. She knows that life does not always unfold under ideal conditions, but she has also learned not to wait for perfection before beginning. In this exhibition, what mattered most was not that the paintings were presented in their original form. What mattered was that the stories entered a public space, even if only on temporary panels, even if only as pinned reproductions, even if the exhibition did not look like what she had imagined. It happened. And for an artist who has spent much of her life carrying memory across cultures, languages, homes, and losses, that small public beginning may be more significant than it first appears. Sometimes, the most important exhibition is not the one that looks the most polished. Sometimes it is the one in which the artist finally steps into the public square and lets the stories be seen.